Thank you, Mark, and a big hello from London. So my commentary last week showed a busy time both weekly and for the month of August. And you might be forgiven for thinking, okay, now these are out of the way, we'll settle down to perhaps a quieter time. But that has not been the case this past week. This commentary may not be as large as last week's, but there's a hell of a lot in the details this time. I'll start with the currencies, and there has been a theme throughout one particular currency. We had weekly key reversals down in Aussie dollar against the Japanese yen, sterling against the Japanese yen, euro against the Japanese yen, and US dollar against the Japanese yen, as well as a weekly key reversal up in Japanese yen against the Chinese yuan. I'll concentrate for the moment on US dollar Japanese yen. That is a good guide to all these yen crosses. Plus I cover it in more detail in my daily foreign exchange commentaries. In all these, we have had a follow-on lower after an initial hesitation on Monday. We've had a follow-on lower in the direction of a stronger Japanese yen. Prices have broken down through significant supports, today at 143.77 and 141.80, and most of all below the early August low at 141.66. This break lower is not fully stabilized just yet, but it brings into focus a big picture pattern for the whole early July to date action being a possible bearish halfway hesitation. This is not done, not just yet. So I cannot lay out targets below for this pattern, but I can start looking at potentials. And these would be potentially down at the 131 even zone, and maybe down as far as the 129 even zone. I'll let that sink in for a moment. And it's with all the implications these may imply. We also had the following FX weekly key reversals down last week. In US dollar Swiss franc, which so far has not followed on lower, though it is still within last week's range. And I suspect the reason for the lack of impetus lower may be because we're already at the recent lows. In US dollar Thai baht, which I suspect suffers from the same reason, and US dollar Singapore dollar, which again suffers, I suspect, from the same reason, and US dollar Philippine peso, which, guess what, similarly suffers the same situation. The next grouping all come under the same heading of fixed income products, and it has an international flavor. We had weekly key reversals up in UK gilt futures, German Bund futures, US T-note futures and US T-bond futures, and Japanese Osaka JGB futures last week. The US futures have seen the clearest moves higher this week, though all of them have moved higher from their Monday morning openings. Though the German Bund futures have barely managed it, whilst the UK gilt futures have fared better. If I take the US T-note futures as an example, we are making new highs not seen since May last year. I would like you to make a special note. When you look at the daily chart, compare the action since July there to a US dollar Japanese yen chart. One is the somewhat inverted shape of the other. I have two more groupings I'd like to discuss. The first grouping is the stock index futures, and I include in this specifically German DAX stock index futures, the US E-mini stock index futures, and the Japanese Nikkei 225 stock index. All these three had weekly key reversals down last week. The Japanese Nikkei 225 index has had a follow-on lower this week. The German DAX futures has tried to follow on lower, but so far, though edging lower yesterday, has not exploited the potential from last week's pattern. The E-mini S&P futures have not had a follow-on lower this week, moving up well into last week's range. I would like to discuss this one a little further. You see, the weekly key reversal down here is unusual on two, possibly three levels. Firstly, it came immediately after the previous week's weekly key reversal up, which was close to the all-time high of the market. Thus, last week's pattern was in fact an immediate countering weekly key reversal down. An unusual, though not unique, pattern. Secondly, if you look on a daily chart back at the high formed in the middle of July, you'll notice that this was caused by a weekly key reversal down, not dissimilar to the one we had last week. I cannot say for definite. We look to be the following on lower to this, but to apply and paraphrase the words of Samuel Clemens, history does not repeat itself, but it does seem to rhyme. The possible third point is a longer term one and refers to my video made at the start of 2024, where I discussed an extrapolation of the famous W.D. Gann financial timetable for 2024. Everyone becomes fixated on what happens in October of such years, but the signs are usually seen in September. So, caution. My final grouping is a singular one. It is spot gold. I have an issue with this commodity on my daily chart. You see, I usually compile the weekly patterns of the previous week over the subsequent weekend, so that I can have a clean, clear picture, for me at least, and take my time in deciphering what has been going on. Last Saturday in the afternoon London time, I looked at spot gold and I recall seeing a weekly key reversal up pattern there for last week. When I next looked at my charts on the Monday, early on the Monday morning, this past Monday morning, what I had seen, and I believe clearly at the time, as a weekly key reversal up, had now become a weekly key reversal down. Now, I initially put this down to my misreading the daily chart, which happens occasionally. However, I was certain I had seen a weekly key reversal up, and I cross-checked it with a colleague of mine who had access to a different charting system, and he agreed. The glitch in the matrix, as I call it, seems to relate to the lower opening price on Sunday night. And as this is an OTC market, one does not have a universally agreed upon open, high, low, or close. So I've labeled this as a weekly key reversal down, open bracket, up, question mark, close bracket. This week we seem to be moving up to test the high of last week and the week before and the all-time high 3 weeks ago. I'll let you be the judge of that one. As always, I'm happy to answer any direct questions with anyone who's interested, and with that I'll finish this section from London, and I hope that you found these comments useful.
Thank you for listening. This weekly broadcast gives the essential market patterns and consequences. Please be aware of the risk disclaimer posted both at the front and at the back of this broadcast. Copyright is Eddie Toftbeek and ADM Investor Service International Limited. And here comes the final important bit.